It's My Nerd World, the Star Wars show, and on this week's episode, Ahsoka Season 2 gets the green light and an upgrade, plus rumors abound about the next Disney theatrical film. When is it coming? What is it called? What's it about? Has the writer's strike had an impact on it? I'll give you all the details on this week's episode. Thank you so much for checking out a Star Wars show, as always. You can go to mynerdworld.net to find out all things My Nerd World, including this podcast and my EMBARK science fiction space opera book series, and email me, TalkShowNerd@gmail.com.
Nothing will stand in our way.
I find your lack of faith disturbing.
I will finish what you started.
Who are you? I'm no one.
There are stories about what happened.
It's true. All of it.
The Force. It's calling to you. Just let it in.
Welcome to it, the Star Wars show, and I'm your host, Jon Justice. Thank you so much for checking out the episode. If you are listening and watching on YouTube, I hope you will hit the subscribe button and the alert to get notified whenever new episodes pop up, and you subscribe on whatever podcast platform you happen to be listening to the show on. I don't know about you, I miss having Star Wars around the holiday season. I love the holiday season. And there was a moment in time after getting the series of films that we did during the holiday season. Halloween is when I kind of count that into the holiday season. I think most people do, right? Or am I on an island on that one by myself, like Luke Skywalker? I think most people consider when Halloween rolls around, that's the holidays. Or do people generally consider it just Thanksgiving, Christmas, and New Year's? Either way, I put Halloween into that category. And typically right around this time is when we would be getting the full theatrical trailer for whatever the Christmas release of the new Disney-era Star Wars movie would be. Of course, that's not happening anytime for the near future. And I remember going back to The Rise of Skywalker after I mentioned having several films come out during the holiday season, thinking to myself, man, you know what? It's been so dominated, the holidays have, by Star Wars, that I almost wish that they would move the films. Of course, when they did do that with Solo, we all know how that turned out. However, now, having a few Christmases without Star Wars, it feels like it's losing a bit of magic. Not very much. Holiday season and Christmas is my favorite time of year. Fall is my favorite season of the year because it does usher in the kickoff of the holiday season. But I'm definitely down for more Star Wars hype around the holidays. And I've beat the drum on this show all the time of how, in my opinion, Star Wars needs to be back on the big screen. That's where it belongs. I will say, though, with Ahsoka and how much I enjoyed that show, it really has put those live-action shows in a particular emotional spot for me. It is Star Wars. Ahsoka feels like Star Wars, but it is, for me, a different type of Star Wars. It's a different experience than you get going in to see a film on the big screen or even watching a movie at home. Be that as it may, Ahsoka, I love that series so much. And it really has made me appreciate the other live-action shows that didn't land for me quite as well. But I have found myself going back and watching Kenobi again. And while I've still got a ton of problems with it, I seem to be enjoying it more than I did before. And maybe it's because I'm giving it more leeway. Maybe I'm still riding the wave off of my love of Ahsoka. But what they did with those characters, I just finished up another rewatch. The mythology within that series and how it was able to tell this cohesive story that did leave these open-ended questions at the end, but still had a feeling of finality to it. I really appreciated the vibe of Star Wars for me being back in that series. I have a listener feedback that I'll share with you that disagrees with me a little bit, and I think Star Wars, I know Star Wars means different things for different people, and different people consider Star Wars to be something other than what somebody else does. You know, I've said this many times. You know, one person's love of Ahsoka is to another person and their love of Andor, and thinking that Andor is what Star Wars really is. Either way, I have an update for Ahsoka. The epic finale ended with a massive cliffhanger. Grand Admiral Thrawn and his minions successfully fleeing Peridea to return to the main Star Wars galaxy, leaving Ahsoka Tano, Sabine Wren, and Ezra Bridger stranded. This comes from Epic Stream. Lucasfilm is reportedly making a massive change and has given the green light to Season 2. Before I dive further into this article, again, having wrapped up another rewatch of Ahsoka, at the end of the show, I caught something I hadn't caught before, and that was that Hu Yang and Sabine have this exchange of him working on the ship. So I don't know if the question was answered. And watching the series the second time again, I don't recall seeing it. Well, actually, I've seen it a few times now. I don't recall seeing this answered in the series of whether or not just a regular starship can jump that far. If the Eye of Sion had to be built with multiple hyperdrives specifically because of its sheer size and what it had to bring back. So clearly, the use of the space whales to get to Peridea would indicate that they couldn't use a standard starship, but I don't, because if so, they could have jumped on the Ghost and traveled there. So maybe that in and of itself is the answer to the question without having it said explicitly. If anybody wants to add anything to that, you can leave me an email, talkshownerd@gmail.com, or up on YouTube. The article goes on to say, obviously plans to call for the finale to connect directly into Dave Filoni's Mandoverse crossover film, where the ongoing plot would probably be resolved, but that's not to say that a second season isn't possible for the Rosario-led series. Recently, reports circulated that Lucasfilm was still toying with the idea. Now, a new rumor suggests Season 2 is actually already in the works. And not only that, but the production company is said to be making a massive change to the series to make it feel grander than it already is. According to ex-insider at My Time to Shine, Ahsoka Season 2 has finally received the green light. Key details surrounding the season weren't disclosed, but according to Den of Nerds, also on X, Lucasfilm is actually moving to Pinewood Studios in the UK from its original home in Los Angeles. For the uninitiated, the first season of Ahsoka was filmed at the MBS Media Campus, which is smaller in comparison to the iconic Pinewood Studios, which was home to several Star Wars projects, including the sequel trilogy and Andor. Of course, Lucasfilm has yet to be making anything official, so it's still best to take this with one huge grain of salt. But if the latest rumors end up being true, it appears that Kathleen Kennedy and company have enough faith in the show to give it such an upgrade. Now, I have to assume, and I didn't do any research further on this, so my apologies, but I have to assume that Pinewood Studios has a volume in and of itself, and perhaps they're going to be utilizing a larger volume. One of the reasons why Andor looked as great as it did was because they went to a lot of real locations. It was clear that Ahsoka was shot on the volume, although I will say that much in the same way that Andor took advantage of it, I really think the one show that suffered the most from the volume was Kenobi. There were some scenes in Kenobi that just were atrocious, in my opinion, in terms of how blatant it was that it was on the volume. The Mandalorian, I think, has utilized the volume the best with Ahsoka. I would place second in terms of using the volume and still being able to show something that looks like it's grand and almost movie quality. And then I would put Book of Boba Fett third, and then I would definitely place Kenobi down fourth. I put Andor in a completely different category simply because of what I mentioned, that it was shot on a lot of physical locations. It's clear, too, though, that given the way that they ended Ahsoka, that it wouldn't take too much to not have a season 2 and still have Ahsoka and the other Mandoverse shows roll into a film. There's another story that can certainly be told, and not knowing what the core of Dave Filoni's Mandoverse film would be is tough to extrapolate further. But I could definitely see how some tweaks in storytelling could definitely lend itself to Ahsoka Season 1 simply being the only season that we got before we got the movie, and the plot points that were not resolved in season 1 end up being resolved in the film. That being said, I'm excited that it appears, at least for now, that we're getting an Ahsoka season 2, and if they are moving to Pinewood to perhaps enhance the viewing experience, then all the better. I really, again, just think that Dave Filoni knocked it out of the park, and I honestly haven't loved a piece of Star Wars this much, and wanted to rewatch it as much as I have the last film, The Rise of Skywalker, which I still enjoy thoroughly. At the moment, it's still one of my favorite Star Wars films, and at the moment, my favorite of the sequel trilogy. All right, let's move on to, speaking of films, our next item this week.
Something inside me has always been there. But now it's awake. And I need help.
I want to share with you some of the points of this rumor. Comes from Star Wars Newsnet. Miguel Fernandez writes, "If I were into gambling, I would be very willing to put a lot of money into Lucasfilm's first item on their internal meetings, being the upcoming Daisy Ridley-led Star Wars feature film, which Stephen Knight is scripting and Sharmeen Obaid-Chinoy directing. Taika Waititi's project would be a not-so-distant number 2 in my book. If you've been paying attention to some of the latest instances from Star Wars around you in the rumor mill, you might have noticed some headlines claiming that the title of the new film has been uncovered. This apparently is coming from a Reddit post that may or may not have been posted in recent weeks, which they said the title of the film is Star Wars: A New Beginning. Allow us to throw a bit of light on this. First off, let me say up front, I don't buy this for a second. A New Beginning is so completely on the nose, for one. We haven't even received a casting for this film. With the strikes going on in Hollywood, I would highly doubt they've landed on a title at this point in time. But be that as it may, I'll continue with the article. Per sources, Lucasfilm hasn't decided on a title for the film yet. Is more focused on getting the actual story right for now. I hear that saying this is the title as of today is absolutely incorrect, but at some point a short list of possible titles is considered, and A New Beginning is not out of the question. And George Lucas even had The Beginning, or The Beginning, as the title of The Phantom Menace when he first started writing the first draft of that screenplay. Back in early April, Kathleen Kennedy said that Lucasfilm was due a script at the end of May. Of course, that never happened. We had the writer's strikes going on. With the contract between the writers and the studios ratified, including, that means freeing up Stephen Knight, it was speculated that the end of May window may have been moved to the end of October, given Knight was allowed to open final draft again back in September. Final draft is what they, I guess, use when they're writing their scripts. However, since they've stopped working for a long time and they actually can't really move forward with pre-production until the SAG-AFTRA strike ends, and they can cast the movie. I argue the studio might have given Knight time until Thanksgiving. Well, while they didn't go into more specifics, a source in the know said this end of October Thanksgiving due date is in the ballpark of Lucasfilm's actual plans. So it seems fair to assume that by Christmas break, Lucasfilm will at least have read the new script and likely given notes as well. Let me stop here really quick. I just want to throw something in, and I debated on whether or not I wanted to cover it on the show this week, and I might save it for next week, or I may not get much into it at all. For those that haven't seen it, and for those that have seen it, South Park skewered Disney, Lucasfilm specifically, and Kathleen Kennedy in one of their latest episodes, riffing off of this idea of the Pander Stone. And the Pander Stone gave Kathleen Kennedy the ability to churn out films within a certain storytelling method that the fans would go and love, but unfortunately the fans turned against them, and she used the Pander Stone too much, and now it's grown out of control at this point in time. I'm giving you the short version of the way the episode played out. It is very funny. In terms of satirical commentary, it's pretty much on the nose when we look at what Disney and Lucasfilm, and not just Star Wars, has attempted to do with their products. Certainly in the world that we live in right now, and the injection of so many different ideas and the attempts to make things, force things to be something that will appeal to everybody and not offend. I get all that. And while I still love the sequel, trilogy, and I don't really put a lot of the complaints that other people do with regard to the commentary that I just gave in those films, or even in a lot of the live action. I certainly understand where the satire was coming from and the level of truth that was in it. I only bring it up because I do wonder moving forward with the rumors now that Kevin Feige and Marvel being in a bit of a state of panic over the lack of success of their recent live-action shows and the films as well, how much discussion there will be of perhaps turning back the clock on the storytelling to a simpler time and not making things so overly complicated and just work on telling a good story with the actors that fit the story. Not what you think people want to see, but the people that are actually best for the roles. I'm curious to see what ends up happening, and if that ends up having any sort of effect, the lack of success, and the fact that the social commentary around it has, been pretty pointed and accurate in terms of the way that they've created a lot of their content as of late, a lot of which has not played out the way that they have hoped. I was watching Christine with my wife Melinda this past week for Halloween, and at the end of that film, and I was struck by how much I knew about it. I must have owned the VHS at some point and just never got it on DVD or Blu-ray, because once the film started, I went, oh yeah, I mean, I knew all about it. I knew all the different beats that were coming up, and I didn't realize that I'd had that close a relationship with Christine, but still a fantastic movie. But one of the things at the end of that film that really stuck out to me was how simple and straightforward it was. A little over, about an hour, 45 minutes. And you could push 2 hours there. The storytelling wasn't muddled. It didn't go overly out of its way to explain things. It left things a bit of a mystery. The dialogue was still snappy. It didn't really linger on anything too long. It wasn't drawn out. It was very simple yet effective, compelling, and interesting storytelling that you just don't see that much anymore. I think it's part of the reason why I enjoyed Ahsoka so much, is that it did sort of really bring things down to its essence over the course of those 8 episodes, and gave you plenty to ponder, but also didn't overdo it the way that so many films, especially Marvel films, do. There's a less is more to filmmaking. And even when you go back and watch that original Star Wars, I still absolutely contend that original Star Wars movie works so well because it's just so straightforward. Beginning, middle, and end, MacGuffin, a hero's journey. I mean, Lucasfilm in writing that story just absolutely nailed it. According to sources from earlier this year and reports, the shooting schedule to start in April 2024 in London. That was original for this latest Daisy Ridley-led Star Wars feature film. However, if by Christmas we still don't have a finished script and we haven't even cast the movie, that seems doubtful to say the least. An August-September start date seems much more reasonable, maybe slightly optimistic. I think it hinges on whether Knight's Draft is a winner with Lucasfilm and whether or not they move forward with this version of the story or not. I think additional variables as well. Is anyone besides Daisy Ridley coming back too? John Boyega came to mind. Obviously, at some point, he must have come up with within conversations in Lucasfilm as well. Other names, Adam Driver, Mark Hamill, Oscar Isaac, seem like much bigger stretches. At most, they would be reduced to cameos. Something that can be inserted into or taken out of the script, depending on who agrees to return. The film's big get still is, of course, Daisy Ridley. And while reports suggest she was not part of Damon Lindelof's story, the actress has had meetings with Lucasfilm towards the end of 2023, and several of them. Repeated across several interviews at the beginning of 2023, she said she'd love to return. A bit of an unexpected twist, but it seems plausible to assume that Kathleen Kennedy and her team weren't in love with Lindelof's idea of exploring an elder Rey and started exploring the possibility of bringing Daisy back a couple of months before Lindelof and Justin Britt Gibson were supposed to return with their draft. But Daisy Ridley is coming back, so as a business as usual, it seems like a good guess that she was at least given a multiple film deal, perhaps even more than that. And you can't help but wonder with Daisy Ridley really not having much success beyond The Rise of Skywalker, of whether or not she sees this as an opportunity to be and continue to be this beloved character. It will be a smart move on her part, and it certainly wouldn't be the first time that a Star Wars actor or actress has kind of been pigeonholed within that particular character. But at the same time, you get to work, you get a nice paycheck out of it, you get to be beloved by fans. What downside is there? She has a lot more bargaining power than she had back in 2013. Getting back into the rest of this piece. It says, the story will be centered around her character, so it's entirely possible she will also have a role as producer on the film. Similar how to Diego Luna is executive producer on Andor. Such a deal would allow Ridley to be part of Lucasfilm's meetings on the film while the SAG-AFTRA strike is still ongoing. In other words, she wouldn't be able to rehearse the lines, but she could give her input on the latest story developments. For now, this remains entirely speculation. As for the release date, May of 22nd of 26 still seems in the cards, 2026, although I wonder if the strike and the stream of delays will cause that to be changed as well. Shooting any time in 2024 seems more than enough time to make the May 2026 date. Whatever the case may be, it seems like we're going to get a lot of Star Wars film news, which is a perfect Christmas gift for us as fans. Absolutely. And it'd be nice. It'd be nice to see if we actually got some of these rumors confirmed moving forward, and we had a little bit more to chew on in terms of fans, because there really isn't a lot to discuss at the moment. There's been some rumors coming out about Skeleton Crew, but again, they're just rumors, and we still don't have locked-in dates for those shows next year. The writer list for The Acolyte was recently released, so perhaps Disney is getting close to starting, really early pre-promotion on that into next year, but we'll just have to wait and see. In the meantime, I want to hear from you. Any thoughts that you have? Drop me an email, talkshownerd@gmail.com. Again, that's talkshownerd@gmail.com. All right, let's get to your listener feedback this week.
I need someone to show me my place in all this.
In asking the question a few episodes back of whether or not they should reboot the original Star Wars trilogy, have some responses with regard to that. JCVal93 writes, reboot, no! Couple of exclamation points. What I would like to see is the Star Wars, the original 1974 screenplay. In this version, Han Solo is a green-skinned alien, and Luke is a much older character. It's been done as a comic book already, but I would love to see this as a live-action film, or even as an animated series, or something for the 50th anniversary of Star Wars in 2027. Yes, I still call it Star Wars. Re-release the original print that millions saw myself back in 1977. No special editions. Thank you, JC, as always, for the comment. We disagree on this, obviously. I love the special editions. I don't need the original print. However, when it comes to the Star Wars and the original 74 screenplay that was turned into a comic book, I don't see them ever doing that, but I would be down for that. That, to me, would be very well suited for a live-action Disney streaming movie using the volume. Basically, Star Wars version of What If. They'll never do it, and I think the reason they'll never do it is out of the fear that it actually becomes very successful and the potential that it could have to really go and taint the product that is their bread and butter of the original Star Wars. If it were me, I'd throw caution to the wind and I'd go ahead and do it. Again, I think that's perfect to utilize the advantages of less complicated production when it comes to the volume technology to do something one-off and interesting like a completely different Star Wars version than what ended up landing on the big screen. As always, though, thank you for the email. Friend of the show, Michael E. Tennant, and maker of good music on YouTube, says, thank you. I've been saying the same thing about the lightsaber choreography in that the prequels were over-choreographed. Hands down, the best duel has always been Return of the Jedi because the weight behind the fight, not because of the choreography. As far as the reboot, normally I would be open to such a thing, but I just don't think it would work for Star Wars because it's still an ongoing story that has so many different paths you can take and characters to explore. If anything, I think we just need to move on and create new characters, new worlds, and new villains across the board. They need to hire directors that know how to tell a story and stop hiring random people who have not had experience handling something on the level of Star Wars. Yeah, I tend to agree with that. You know, there's something to be said about the individuals who helm those films. And one of the reasons I love The Rise of Skywalker, I think, so much is because I just happen to be a big fan of J.J. Abrams and his storytelling style. And I find his films infinitely rewatchable. Because of that, the movie that he made is definitely a J.J. Abrams Star Wars movie. More so by a large margin than The Force Awakens. I think The Force Awakens was very carefully crafted by J.J. to have his own style on it, but also maintain as much aesthetic as he could without making it seem like a complete and utter reboot. And I feel like he did a really good job at that. I've said this many times. I feel like Rian Johnson, who made a masterpiece in my opinion, really gave J.J. Abrams the opportunity to go and do what he wanted to do. That was a J.J. Abrams Star Wars movie. In as much as the original 2009-2010 Star Trek reboot film, J.J. said was a Star Wars movie. When you watch it, it feels like a Star Wars movie. And I love J.J. Abrams and his storytelling. So to me, it's like, if I was going to make a Star Wars movie, it'd be a lot like what J.J. Abrams made in The Rise of Skywalker. N. Black writes, I've been a Star Wars fan my whole life. I saw the original trilogy when I was 5 years old. Hey, we're about the same age. I've been following the Disney-era Star Wars very closely, and I've come to believe that Disney and Lucasfilm are in an almost impossible situation. They're kind of stuck in this limbo between content geared at children and the content aimed for adults. In the process, they're losing fans while not really gaining new ones at the rate they once did. I don't disagree. For example, the Boba Fett show. In the Mandalorian show, he was reintroduced as this brutal, cold-blooded character that we thought he was all along. And then in his show, he's this sort of watered-down diplomat. In Kenobi, you have people being stabbed with a lightsaber, seemingly dying only to return. They do it again in Ahsoka. Yeah, but they do it better in Ahsoka than they do Kenobi. That's just me. I'm biased because I love Ahsoka so much. Well, I love the show so much. Sabine's my favorite character. They constantly suck all the weight out of their content when there's nothing ever really feels like anything is at stake. Hence, these shows come off as extremely disposable and forgettable. It's like they can't commit to anything. It's so weird to watch. The only two things that come out of this post-Lucas era that I feel is legit is Rogue One and Andor. And N. Black, I appreciate I do. Because I appreciate your opinion, but I don't like the blanket statements as I talk about so much. It is subjective. And so kudos to you, my friend, for doing that. This is how I feel. People die in those, and you feel the urgency in those, which is why I believe if anyone should take over this aimless ship, it should be Gilroy. He's the only one who has shown any grit in his storytelling. I don't disagree. I don't think it should be Gilroy. I think Gilroy should be a part of it, but it should be like, I want to see like a Gilroy Dave Filoni collaboration, because Gilroy's not a fan, and that's a part of what I felt like was missing for me personally from Andor. It's like it went out of its way to not use the Panderstone. It needed some Panderstone in it. Lastly, Steve D. Martin writes, wow, John, quite an intelligent take on this particular trilogy. This is in response to my greatest love story Star Wars ever told podcast from last year. Wasn't a big fan of the newer movies. Maybe I'll take another look at them with that theory in mind. Thank you for that, Steve Martin. Cool name. And thank you to everybody who wrote in this week. I very much appreciate it and appreciate you listening to the show. As always, if you want to support my nerd world and you like to read science fiction, I hope if you haven't done it already, you'll check out my science fiction space opera series. You can purchase paperbacks directly from me and hardcovers too. I forget. I've got plenty of books here at home. All you have to do is drop me an email, talkshownerd@gmail.com, and I will give you the details on how you can purchase those books directly from me at a discount from what you pay for them on Amazon, and I'll sign them as well. You usually get them within about a week. So any books in the 7-book series. Treat yourself, a friend, or a family member with science fiction, especially this holiday season. They are written for adults, but ages 11 plus can read them in terms of the content. There's no profanity, no explicit material, and think about the violence in terms of what you would get in Star Wars. Again, available in hardcover and paperback from me or Amazon.com. Audiobook free on Kindle Unlimited, and also ebook as well. If you like your science fiction space opera to be epic and filled with romance and action, EMBARK is perfect for you. So head on over to Amazon.com, search for Jon, Jon Justice, and EMBARK, or mynerdworld.net. Thank you so much for checking out the episode this week. I really do appreciate it. Should be back next week, taking a week off the following week as I'm heading to Denver to see my favorite band ever, Depeche Mode, but I will have another episode next week. Until that time, I hope wherever you are, you're happy, you're healthy, and you are safe. Oh, and one more item to mention. If you happen to be listening to this and you live in the Twin Cities area, we're doing another meet and greet. I will have paperbacks and hardcover copies of EMBARK with me. Liz Cullen from Alpha News locally will be joining me as well. We're going to be at Big Wood Brewery in White Bear Lake this Saturday, the 4th, from noon until 2. If you need any details, just drop me an email. I'll send them right to you. Again, TalkShowNerd@gmail.com. We'll talk to you next week. Hopefully, if you're in town, I'll see you on Saturday. Bye.
The Force will be with you, always.
My Nerd World.